The agenda is sponsored by Newcastle County Government.
Community. I really wanted to teach public school coming out of college. I got a little sidetracked.
I'll give you my opinion, but what's your opinion?
Well, it's a fundamental thing like that we can help teach them while they're here.
Hands up, I have questions.
Not as much as I would like to see.
People are waiting for the money to roll out.
Well, that money won't roll out for weeks or months, but we are this close to finalizing the text of the bill.
Latino population, it affects them disproportionately more than any other population.
It was just set aside because of the pandemic, but it allowed us to do virtual programs.
Down during the pandemic, it was just too unreliable.
Really? This week on the agenda, we have the pleasure of sitting with Mr. Ron Smothers, a good friend of mine, a golf partner of mine, a critic of mine. He is a New York Times reporter, retired University of Delaware professor, and a strong curmudgeon. So take your time, listen to our discussion, and let us know what you think.
You do.
I don't have a
Oh, yes, you do. Outside of the cigar lounge where you hold court daily, I mean, what is, for folks who don't know, because you've taught at the University of Delaware. You've
Rutgers too.
Rutgers. Tell people a little bit about that. Where did it begin? Okay. I won't ask to date you.
Well, look, I'm past that.
Okay.
You know, I'm not embarrassed about my age at all. When I was the Atlanta bureau chief for the Times, I forget some of the names, but this was back in the early '90s. Not that far. That long ago. I was asked to come up to Harvard and address a group of international journalists who were brought on fellowship to Harvard every year. And so based on what I had been doing, covering the South, I prepared a presentation for them. And it delved into history. It talked to us a little bit about the South, the history of the South, and how it had been trying to come to grips with race. Okay, and that's what it was about, and that's what these foreign journalists apparently wanted to know. And so I made this presentation, which had a lot of history in it, quite a bit of literature because I like literature, and a lot of psychology
right.
in it, courtesy of Toni Morrison, basically.
Okay.
And a friend of mine, who was professor at Rutgers, saw my presentation. And he looked at me, and we'd gone to high school together. And he said,
was there competition between the two of you? Because I know you're a competitive gentleman. I didn't know. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay.
I'm not going to dignify that. Okay. Anyway, you may know him, his name, Clement Price. He was an expert on blacks and race in New Jersey, as well as a good historian. He said, Ronnie, because that's what they called me when I was in high school. He says, you got a course here. I said, what do you mean? He said, this is a course. He said, sit down, run it through your computer a few times, and give me a syllabus. And I'm going to see what we can do. Maybe we can do something with it. So I did that. And that's where the course Race and the Media was born. And maybe it was late 80s, 1980s. I was still in Atlanta then. It was early 90s. And I came up with this course, with books and everything. And he said, "You're going to teach it next semester. There's a seminar."
Right.
Yeah. I said, okay. Yeah. And I did. And then I did for the next 5 years. and it was an adjunct position.
Right. One that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
I understand.
I wasn't a full professor or even, on any tenure track or anything like that. It was an adjunct. But that was okay because I was still working full time at the newspaper. So that's how it started. And like I said, I did it for 5 years. When I was about ready to retire, I heard from a colleague of mine who had gone to the University of Delaware, of their distinguished visiting professor of journalism program. I applied for it, basically using, hey, this is the course I teach, And so I basically brought the course down to the University of Delaware. And I did it for a year. I didn't do it for very long because I discovered that golf was more fun.
It doesn't take long.
And plus, I was retired.
You're right. So why I have you here, and I know that previously you reported a lot about the state of New York.
Yeah.
And everything. So I don't want to say...
I covered the state capitol.
You covered the state capitol. So Cuomo was a name that may have popped up, I'm assuming. Right?
It did.
It did, right? Father.
Yes,
the
Mario.
father, Mario. Now, I don't think it's a shock to anybody. The sons are in a little bit of hot water.
Well, hot water is putting it mildly. They are history. now,
we can't presume that.
Well, you're right, because there are second acts.
Right.
There are second acts.
So, but you're definitely saying the first act is over.
Oh, yeah.
For both sons.
Well, I don't... See, Andrew is the only one I guess I really know anything about, because I don't know anything about Chris.
Okay.
I don't know anything about Chris. And I'm far away from media politics and media,
But you have an opinion.
Well, look, come on. Here's my view of CNN. It's a historical view. When I was in Atlanta, every week, the CNN correspondent who covered that area would come to me and say, "Ron, what you going to do this week? Because I know whatever you're going to do, I'm going to have to follow up on it." See, that's kind of my attitude.
Finish with the Cuomos.
Okay. Andrew was not well liked among Democrats.
I've heard that. I heard he wasn't well liked by many people, regardless of political affiliation.
Yes, yeah, but by Democrats. And that may seem strange to people because you say, you note he kept getting reelected. Well, the reason he kept getting reelected is the Republican Party in New York is kind of a wasteland. They don't have a talent bench. They don't have it. The Democrats do. Okay. Cuomo, because of his name, his father, and the history there, was seen as someone who could continue Democratic hegemony. And so he won election. But as people got to know him, they didn't like him. He was not, unlike his father, who had this reputation of being a very thoughtful, contemplative guy, and a very human guy. His son didn't have that reputation.
Really?
Just the opposite.
I was thinking,
he was smart, don't get me wrong.
His handling of the explanation. I think he was very good at explaining things. So I was a fan, I am a fan of President Obama during his tenure as guiding this lovely country of ours.
Let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
Guiding this lovely country of ours.
What's that got to do with Cuomo, though?
I'm getting
Okay.
there.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
Mhm.
But he was not very good at explaining things. For the average person,
But Cuomo was, you're saying.
I think that he was.
Okay, and I think I would suspect your prime example of that is COVID.
Yes.
Okay, but he has history before that.
Regardless, he explained it well.
But he has history, which is built into how he was viewed going into that. And part of that history is governors of New York State are very powerful.
Agreed.
Cuomo did not resist using his power. His father was a little,
Well, obviously he didn't resist using his power. Ask his
And-
state police detail.
and he crushed people. And he crushed a lot of people. He intimidated a lot of people. And because of that history, all before COVID, his reputation among Democrats was just not good.
Mm-hmm.
But they were kind of stuck with him because he could win.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because of the Cuomo name, partly because he didn't have any big scandals, okay? And partly because the Republicans didn't have anybody of any worth to put up against him. So, you know, you dance with the one that brung you. And
That's
so,
very New York.
yeah, very, very. And he could, here's the other things for New York. He could bridge downstate, upstate, which was always a big thing.
Those are two different states.
Yeah, it was always a big thing in New York. But, so COVID comes on, and you're right, he shows his smarts. He gets out there and he talks to American people, and I mean American people, because that's who he was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't just talking to New Yorkers.
Absolutely. The
Okay.
American people heard him.
That's right. And he looked good.
Right.
He looked good.
But didn't you, I don't know if we talked
And
about
I agree,
it.
he looked good.
He looked good, but I knew there was something up because he looked that good. And at the same time that Biden won the election and was appointing people, his name never seemed to be in contention. It's almost as though the administration and the population, other than those watching, knew that there was a backstory to this gentleman and it was not good.
Okay.
Therefore, his tenure was governor and that's it.
Okay, because I was not involved in covering politics.
But you watched it, Ron. You watched it.
But I am not privy to why the Democrats may have seen, I can only guess why they seemed hesitant pushing him forward as opposed to a Biden, okay? And part of that is I just don't know. I didn't interview people to say, oh, Cuomo, no, we don't think he would be a good candidate because of this. Now, they may have been saying that, but I don't know that they were saying that. When you look at it from the outside, yeah, you're right. But see, but by the time we almost got there, Biden was positioned, I think, to be the Trump alternative.
Well, we did. And people may email me, chat with me in disagreement. I don't think we had much of a choice. From the Democratic side of things, as far as contenders of those who had,
I think you're right,
a chance to beat him.
Yeah.
And it's not just because I'm a Delawarean and I'm,
No. I think you're
blue
absolutely
through
right
and
there.
through. I don't think that we had much of a choice.
Former vice president, a guy with a reputation of being the salt of the earth and just an wonderful average guy.
He passed the kitchen table test.
Yes, he did. Cuomo could not replace that because Cuomo was still a bit of a wild card, not known to the rest of the country. New Yorkers might have known him. People in the rest of the country may have got to know him when the COVID
And we haven't elected a single president that has been, let me retract that. We have not in years of late, elected a president that is unmarried?
I don't think that is as much of an issue, but perhaps it is.
When you're at the kitchen table, those are things that come up.
But perhaps it is. I don't think that that's much of an issue. But again, maybe that's my New York background, you know.
Well, Ron, as always, you've taken me beyond my regular time, and you've pushed me to another thing. You're going to make me miss meetings and everything else. But I want to thank you for being a guest on the agenda. One more question.
Am I a guest on the agenda?
You are now.
I thought we were just talking.
We are just talking. Again, one more question, if you don't mind saying it. I would love to know, are you vaccinated?
Of course.
Of
course. And boosted.
What would you say to someone who is hesitant of getting the vaccine, who may have believed about misinformation?
I can't say it on air. No, I think I believe in science. I believe in knowledge. I believe we advance by following knowledge and science. So I would say to them, read a book.
There he is, my good friend Ron Smothers and I, as they say, chopping it up. I think we should do it again. What do you think? I think we should.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County government.
While we have vaccines that are highly effective, some folks are non-vaxxers, and I get that, but at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about that 5-year-old, that 6-year-old that don't have any options. Should they get infected and you be unable to hold their hand in the ICU simply because you chose not to be vaccinated, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Mr. Brandon Bryce, welcome to the agenda.
Thank you for having me.
It's not oftentimes that we have people that aren't legislators particularly on the agenda, but in this time of the year, especially this season of giving, it's important that we talk about philanthropy and giving. And there's no better organization that I can think of right now other than the United Way to ensure that funds are being appropriated appropriately and being distributed appropriately as well.
You know, it's an organization that's got a 75-year history. And we're really doing great work in the community. And you know, when we talk about holiday season, people are giving back. They're thinking about other people. And that's been our mission for over 75 years.
And what is your role with the United Way?
So I serve as the Director of Philanthropy and Equity. And it's a unique role because it's really around not only just giving back, but really addressing some of the systematic discriminatory issues in our society and in our nation. And so the whole racial equity conversation is how do we make sure things like more people are getting opportunity to access to employment. More people are getting opportunities to different career opportunities that are out there. More people are getting access to quality health care. People that are coming home from being incarcerated, they're getting the opportunity to get a second chance at life. That's the equity issue that we're dealing with, and that's the equity issue, that the United Way has taken on through the DRJC, the Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative.
So first, I'm going to come back to that. But are you seeing with these initiatives? So the United Way is an advocate for a lot of these initiatives and consults with the states and federal governments on creating these programs and programming. But are you seeing any partisan ties and how this affects the giving of these programs? You know,
the beauty of philanthropy is that we don't, we're not concerned about partisan politics. We're focusing on solving the issue. We've seen philanthropic giving from both sides of the aisle, and we're really talking about how do we fix the problems that we have in our state. You know, right now when we talk about issues around getting people, again, access to quality services, given COVID-19, United Way has stepped up in a major way, and the DRJC is taking the task to say that we care not just about giving back, but giving back to those who are in most need and are most vulnerable.
So did you notice, of course, COVID played an impact in so many of our lives, not just here in the state of Delaware, but throughout the country and throughout the world. But how did COVID affect giving? And what were the numbers that you're seeing? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing?
You know, ironically, people gave more, after COVID. And I think it's because, when you talk about a pandemic, and it impacted Delaware very hard, specifically some of our Black and brown communities. And so it's pretty clear that the need was there. But what COVID did, it exposed the problem that we already knew was occurring in our communities. And so United Way and the DRJC has taken on the task to solve these issues through giving, through also collaborative and strategic partnerships of bringing the corporate community and government together to solve these problems.
So what is the DRJC?
The Delaware Racial Justice Collaborative is a collaborative that was actually birthed out of the George Floyd movement. And it was really a way to say, how do we start to address some of the systematic discriminatory issues, specifically in BIPOC communities? And so you're talking about leaders from all over the state that came together to solve these issues and dealing with things like education reform.
The state of Delaware.
State of Delaware.
Okay.
Things like education reform, things like giving people quality access to healthcare services, things like, you know, when a person comes back from home and they're a returning citizen, how do we make sure that they get a second chance at life? And then things like the workforce creation of workforce development, of how do we make sure that we're talking about career paths and not just preparing students in Delaware for the jobs of today, but for the jobs of tomorrow.
Great. So how are you working with local governments, municipalities, state governments, federal governments to ensure that these things are getting done?
So part of that is through strategic partnerships. You know, the city has really been a big partner in helping us solve some of the issues through, you know, a program that we have called the Learning Pods. And what the Learning Pod is it's really taken to say, you know, how do we make sure that students actually are getting a fair shot given COVID-19? It's an opportunity where students can go after school programs, partnering with schools, where they can actually go and get real life training from real life instructors so that they don't miss a beat in COVID-19. We all know, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the education system in America, not just in Delaware, really took a hit.
We are big on this show, and so many of our legislators that come on are as well in regards to infrastructure, human infrastructure and physical infrastructure. So when I'm hearing learning pods, I hear that you are working towards relieving the barriers to entry for kids or for youngsters that are trying to obtain a proper education. A lot of that has to do with Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
A lot of that has to do with computers, and I guess someone knowledgeable in there to help them with their education. And that, to me, is infrastructure. Am I wrong?
No, but that's the greatest kind of infrastructure, is making sure that kids, regardless of their zip codes, have an opportunity to compete. And that's really, when you talk about the DRJC, that's what we're doing when we talk about this equity issue. And what that means we're giving people, despite their challenges, a real fighting chance to be successful in their careers and in life.
So that's a hot button topic right now in politics when they hear equity. A lot of people don't understand what that means. They think that it's just lowering the bar.
Right.
They think that it's giving people handouts, but it's more of equalization, I would consider, than anything else. Would you agree to that?
You know, not only would I agree with that, but I'm a product of equity. I mean, equity is one of those things that says, how do we make sure that communities of color are involved in the skilled trades industry, which we're seeing numbers that aren't sufficient with the state's population. It's saying, how do we make sure that people have real quality access to healthcare? We saw that through the pandemic. And then how do we look at, you know, things like wealth creation and criminal justice to say, are we preparing people for, you know, when they get out of being incarcerated or keeping them from being incarcerated? What opportunities are we truly giving those people? It saves the taxpayer money and it gives people a real chance in society.
So what are big businesses doing to help level this and contribute to your organization?
Well, you know, philanthropy and corporations go hand in hand. You know, their support is really helping us continue the programs like the Learning Pods, like some of the Fusion Alliance, which we just rolled out, which is really addressing some of the diversity issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues in the workforce. But we can always do more. And so I say, you know, support the DRJC for your listeners, because it's that we can do more to help expand and help serve more Delawareans.
So how do we support the DRJC?
www.drjc.org.
You were ready for that.
I was waiting for that. But it's an opportunity, you know, it's about giving back. And the more Delawareans we serve, the better Delaware will be.
Brandon, we're talking about a state now that has more business incorporated in it than it does people, right? It's well known. Delaware is what you do, but we also have some great headquarters here, right? Chemours and so many other companies. So when we're talking about corporate responsibility and giving, how does that work with the United Way?
Well, the thing is, you know, we want our corporate partners to be just that. We want them to be partners. And so it's important that, you know, corporations see the support that we're trying to do and begin to be partners in that in some of our small programs or some of our programs that support our DRJC movement. The other piece to that, though, is that in addition to corporate support, we want to really address the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion
Recently, we had the colonel of the Newcastle County Police on here. We've had legislators on here talking, not necessarily all about the recent things that are going on in this country in regards to Black Lives Matter, but there's also so many things as far as education on both sides of that, from law enforcement and from citizens. Does the United Way have a program directly related to that, and can we fund that?
So here's what's interesting. The DRJC deals with criminal justice reform. And one of the angles that we've looked at is, in addressing police, some of the policing issues, is how much of the community is involved with policing decisions? How much of the police force represents the communities that they serve? We want to handle those issues to get more people of color in law enforcement, because we feel then we'll have a fair share in that area. In some cases, we've been successful, and in some cases, we're still fighting that fight.
So what are the goals for 2022?
Our goals are really to continue to sustain our programs, to build out our learning pods, the Fusion Alliance programs, to expand and partner with other small to mid-sized businesses around their diversity issues. But it's really to address the issues of not only making sure companies are equitable, but making sure that kids are learning, making sure that people are getting jobs and employment if they haven't had that, making sure that people are getting quality access to healthcare. Continuing the tenets of the DRJC, that's our goal, and that's what we plan to enhance in 2022.
Healthcare, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are very much in favor of the vaccine here on this show, ensuring that people are getting the vaccine, ensuring that people are getting tested, not just here in Newcastle County, but throughout the state, and the importance of it and how it affects the human infrastructure of this state and just the overall health of the people here in this state. What are some of the things that your organization is doing for community healthcare to ensure that is happening?
So we have taken a very strong task on making sure that people are getting education about the vaccine, making sure they have quality access to get the vaccine. And there's the elephant in the room is there has been some mistrust in what the vaccine is doing.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so, our history. But what we've done is we're looking at the facts. We're giving Delawareans from all sectors and all neighborhoods real information. We're giving them access to get the vaccine, and also what we're doing is we're trying to be that middleman to help them get the quality care again that they need, and just be more informative. We try to stay out of the politics of it. Our goal is helping people and making sure that people get the healthcare that they need during this time.
So how are our dollars that we're giving to the United Way directly getting to those people?
So those dollars support the programs, as I just mentioned, the Learning Pod programs, the Fusion Alliance programs. And so we totally focus those dollars on making sure that our partners that we support are getting the funding that they need, in addition to making sure that those programs are actually creating impact through reports. And so what we do, we don't just put funding in programs, we actually look at the impact that they're making. I always say, the measurement of the program is also just as important as just putting funding towards that program.
Right, and it's about the people.
It's always about the people.
And ensuring that, people are being affected by these programs.
Absolutely.
I find it interesting that you're not even from Delaware.
No, I'm actually originally from Detroit.
And you walk the halls of the Capitol building, so you understand the agenda, you understand how things work, and the necessity of getting these programs together.
I do. One of the things is that serving people and helping people, I've done it all my life. And I think with this program, United Way has been doing it for 75 years here in Delaware. And my job is to, continue to do it for the continuum of my tenure, and making sure that we not only serve people of color, but we serve the communities that are most vulnerable, and we continue the legacy that we started in, I think it's 45. I think that's when we started.
Well, again, I hope that we hit all your goals that you're trying to accomplish for next year.
All right.
If you ever need us here on the agenda, we are here for you.
All right.
And we look forward to working with you. Well, thank you for taking this great ride with us through the first year of the agenda. This episode deals with what we stand for here, and that's taking care of other people. And we would like to thank Brendan and United Way for coming on and telling us all about it. But we've also dealt with some great issues this year. Everything from the Afghani refugees, dealing with our former governor, Jack Markell, all the way down to prison reentry. We've dealt with some very hard issues. And we'd like to thank you because we've gotten your responses, and we know that you're watching, and we know that you care. Speaking of caring, ensure that you get your COVID vaccine. Ensure that you're being tested if you feel that you've been infected by the disease. Reach out to the county webpage. for future information in regards to testing and vaccination. Again, we'd like to thank you this holiday season for hanging in there with us, and we look forward to seeing you again here on the agenda.